had a lot of them in this matchup between Dubov and Carlsen, but the status is that if Magnus wins this game, they will be equal. The winner of...
Hi guys, how are you doing? Welcome to a new video. In this video, we're going to analyze a game that was played between former world rabbit champion Danil Dubov and current world champion Magnus Carlsen. This is a very crazy game that was played in 2020 in Earthings Masters. Daniel Dubov is playing with white pieces and Magnus Carlsen is playing with black. Daniel Dubov opens the game with 1d4, knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to f3, d5. The queen's gambit declines on the board. g3. Dubov wants to fianchetto his light square bishop via g2 square. Bishop b4 check. Knight b to d2 blocking the check. d takes c4. Magnus grab the pawn. Bishop g2. Dubov doesn't care and continues development. a6. Magnus is strengthening this bishop and also taking some space on the queen side. Dubov undermines the bishop immediately. He asks Magnus, do you want to grab the knight or do you want to go back? Magnus grabs the knight. Bishop takes d2. Bishop takes d2, b5. Magnus has this amazing expansion on the queen side, so Dubov undermines it. a4, c6. Magnus protects the pawn, and also this pawn covers this square, so that if Dubov tries to play knight e5 to open this diagonal, the bishop can take the rook. So queen c2 by Dubov. The computer suggests knight e5, and but yeah, Dubov knows what he's doing. Bishop b7, h4. The best move here was just to castle kingside, and her position is very good. But Dubov has a different approach. Knight bd7 by Magnus. Dubov takes more space on the king side. He says, you have this space on the queen side, I'll take some space on the king side. h6. Magnus prevents more expansion on the king side. Knight e5 finally, but Magnus can take the knight, can trade a pair of knights here, because this knight is very strong, controlling a lot of squares. But Magnus doesn't. He plays knight d5. h4. Dubov is playing very aggressively. He wants to break the rook into the game like this, and then he will play king f1, bring to the king to a more severe square. Magnus doesn't take the knight on e5. Instead, he plays knight f6, king f1, queen by Magnus, queen c7, king g1. If you notice, Dubov wastes two moves to bring the king to a safer square. Knight knight b4 by Magnus, attacking the queen. So Dubov has to retaliate with the queen. Queen c1. Rook d8. The computer says that this move is a mistake. He should have played knight b d5. Should have played knight b d5 here. The knight goes here, knight b d5, and he will have a nice position. In fact, Magnus will be better. Okay, Dubov takes the pawn. C takes b5. Bishop takes b4. Dubov doubles Magnus's pawns and gives him this isolated pawn, so a lot of weaknesses on the queen side for Magnus. And then Dubov pins this bishop. This bishop cannot move because he will take the queen with the rook. Knight by Magnus, knight d5. Rook g4, attacking the g7 square, the g7 pawn. Rook g8, defending the pawn. Queen c2, developing the queen to a nicer square. Maybe he will bring the queen to this diagonal to h7, attacking the rook, and then grabbing the g7 pawn. c3, b takes c3, and b takes c3. And then, like I said, the best move here was just to play queen h7, but Dubov brings the rook back It's very weird that you develop the queen to the seventh rank, which is the best thing you should do with the rook, a very nice rook lift. But then he brings the rook back. Maybe he has another plan. Maybe he will want to bring the knight, this knight, to another square. I mean, he wants to bring it to the d3 square. Then he will bring it to the c5 square, blocking this queen protection of the pawn, and then he will grab the knight that's protecting the pawn as well, and then he will take it with the rook. Maybe that was his plan. Okay, Magnus defense, rook c8, knight d3, knight f6. Bishop takes b7, queen takes b7. Of course, here Magnus is attacking Dubov's rook. So Dubov should obviously move it, I don't know, to f4 square. But instead, Dubov plays knight c5. He attacks the queen, but actually it's a blunder. Here, it's a simple, very simple tactic that like any beginner should know it. But Dubov is a top GM. So of course, Magnus took the knight, rook takes, and then pawn takes, and then he grabbed the rook, and suddenly he's up a full knight, and he's winning the game. And everyone on the commentary said that now Magnus will go to the semifinals, and probably he will win Everything's Masters. Because they thought that Dubov will resign after losing a piece. But instead, Dubov looked at the position for like 4 or 5 seconds, and then he played uh, c6. He pushed the pawn. Magnus or probably should have played queen b6, but instead he takes the pawn, and this is inaccuracy. And then Dubov grabs the pawn, threatening to take the queen, so he has to move the queen away from the c file, queen b6. And here, of course, here, if you see, this pawn is attacked by the knight and also attacked by the queen. So here Dubov played e3, king e7, rook c6. Magnus bring the queen all over to the d8 square. Queen c5 check, king f6, rook d6, attacking the queen. Of course, Magnus should have infiltrated with the queen again and give a few checks. And here the knight here is amazingly placed. He should have like infiltrated with the queen, and his position will be very good. I mean, he should have brought the queen here, and he will still win the game. Instead, he plays queen e7. He thinks that he will pin the rook to the queen, but actually it's wrong. It's a blunder. Dubov, of course, unpins immediately. Queen's d4 check. King g5. Of course, if you notice, this pawn is covering this square and this square. Of course, this pawn is covering also this square. So, and of course, this pawn is covering this square. So you think that Magnus walked in a mating net. Okay, f3. Actually, this is the only move that wins the game for Daniel Dubov. If he plays any random move, any other move, he will lose the game. But Dubov finds the only move that wins him the game. It's f3. What f3? Of course, it attacks the knight, and of course taking the square from the king. Now, and of course giving protection to the queen if needed to go here, if king goes here. So Magnus tries to make some breathing room for the king, but of course Dubov takes the knight, and Magnus tries to bring the rook into the game. Of course, it's a blunder. Of course, Magnus thinks he will bring the rook here and try to give some checks, and then he will still be winning, even like get a draw and try his luck with the white pieces in the next round. But actually, it's a forced checkmate in 2 moves. Dubov gives the check here, queen f4 check, king goes back, and if you notice that this pawn is pinned because of the rook, so Dubov takes the pawn, and it's checkmate in the middle of the board to the world champion Magnus Carlsen by none other than Danil Dubov, the ever creative. So if you look at the game, just in the middle of the game, you'll see Danil Dubov is down a piece, and Magnus have this amazing position. You'll think, oh, Magnus will qualify for the semifinals and Dubov will lose. But Dubov doesn't resign. He just tries again and again, and then he wins the game and gives us one of the craziest games I ever played. Thank you for watching. I will.
Oh my goodness me, he has made a blunder. Okay, he didn't trust that. He didn't calculate. He didn't trust that his king was safe. And now we've seen a turnaround. Could Magnus Carlsen be knocked out?
Magnus Carlsen suddenly losing. He's missed this next move. White, I think, only has one move to win. It's either win or loss here for White. There's no in between. There's no middle ground. White needs to push a pawn up to attack the Black Knight, and he's found it.
Found it. Okay.
Oh my.
And Magnus Carlsen suddenly going down to defeat the Black King. I said it was safe, but he's missed this last move. Black, as Magnus Carlsen, he's put his queen on a bad square. The Black Queen boxed in. He should have brought it round to try and get at the White King from behind. He's missed this move. Magnus Carlsen is on the verge of elimination now.
If Magnus Carlsen loses this game, he will be out. Danil Dubov will be heading to the semi-final. Wow, and we can see it on Magnus now. He definitely... Wow, look at him. He realizes he blundered.
Yeah, total blunder. I mean, it's super difficult to see that your king will be safe in the corner out there in the open, and that Black needed just to activate the queen and have some counter threats. And now Magnus has advanced the pawn, but I think it's all over.
Yeah, and actually we had this scenario yesterday with Magnus, his king being attacked by a queen and a rook. The Black King is not safe. Magnus Carlsen also only with 20 seconds.
It's going to be checkmate.
It's checkmate,
It's checkmate,
on the board.
and that's it. He's... Oh, look at Danil Dubov.